wanted to do the matchup guide of the Sapphire Steel doc build into just the steel matchups, really. Um, of course, there's Amber Steel right now, there's Emerald Steel and Amethyst Steel that are really rocking the meta and are doing very, very well. I will just cover quickly the Sapphire Steel matchup and the one versus the mirror as well, because I don't know when you'd ever play this in a mirror, but maybe you and your mate wanted to play this at a store champs and you somehow got paired round one. So I'll just cover that. In the mirror, it feels like as rough as any mirror. You're pretty much doing what they do, but you're doing it either one turn behind or a turn ahead or whatever, depending on if you're going first or second. So yeah, it really is just play the strongest lines. You know, play the one drop into two drop into Alice Pluto on the play, and try and just race them. You're basically going to be aggroing them, and even if they chase you and you've done your strongest line, you're just going to get more lore than them because you got to go first. And on the draw, you do the same thing, but then you try and use John Silver and Pete to try and swip some of the tempo back. Maybe even double up on one drop so you can pop a Pluto and remove it. So say if you had a Mickey and a Robin Hood and a Calhoun, you could run a Mickey in, take out Pluto of these two, and just maybe swing some tempo back that way. But if they've already got Alice out questing and you haven't been able to like attack her that turn, that can be kind of rough. So like I say, the mirror is just rough. It's just an aggro deck. Pretty much just try and say, how can I gain more lore than them this turn? And that's pretty much all you can do. There's not much else to say on that. I think it is really a matchup where you just hope they brick because they're going to race you when they're on the play, and you're going to race them when you're on the play. And then when on the draw, you're going to hope to try and flip the tempo somehow. So there's no real mulligan guide for that. I hadn't really thought much of the mirror, to be honest with you, because when have I ever played it? And when will you ever play it as well? So yeah, just really try and race them quicker than they can and try tempo swing. On the draw, Calhoun is going to be your best friend in the mirror. But that being said, into Sapphire Steel, I'd like to say you're going to play loads of Sapphire Steel, but the deck sort of is not really as popular as it was before. So the unlikely chance that you will see it, but maybe your local scene has a lot of Sapphire Steel. I think it was like 8% of the room at NA Continentals, which is actually still quite impressive. But yeah, I didn't expect you to play into many of it. So into Sapphire Steel, there's a good match I get from me versus Alphos on Speci's channel. I'd recommend just watching that. And again, I don't think there's any like bells and whistles, any tricks with that one. You just do one drop, two drop, Alice Pluto on the play, and on the draw you do one drop, two drop. Try and swip the tempo a little bit, maybe double spell with two characters. Cogsworth is a real MVP in that matchup as well, and so is Alice. The matchup will feel very much like Ruby Sapphire. They will take turns off to use their ramp, and that's when you can play characters down and race them a little bit more. But again, against it feels like probably an easier version of Ruby Sapphire because you've got cards like Cogsworth, Alice, and Baymax that are actually going to stick in this matchup. They will stay on the board and they will just amass you large amounts of lore. So that's pretty good. Once she's locked in, she's going to quest to give you lore. And if you watch how it ended a lot of those games, it was Alice, quest, ward, Gantu, and then Gantu, quest. So in that interaction, I get 6 lore. And they're pretty much chasing me the entire time. There's no way they could ever race you. The way they could race you is they every turn are playing an item whilst also ramping and then getting a Tamatar on board and turning it sideways. But you know, sometimes they don't get any items, do they? So yeah, it's really quite the simple matchup of just play your lines out, play as aggressively as you can. Really use the Alice, the Cogsworth, and the Baymax. Baymax is very hard for them to remove. They have no brawl or anything like that. So a 2/6. A lot of them don't run Zeus. I didn't run Zeus. They will want to really want to play a Hades or a Let It Go on a Baymax. I don't think so. They might do, but they probably don't want to. So it's really just play your strongest lines out, and hopefully you should come away with the win. They're going to take a turn off to play a Quill, a turn off to play a Hiram, and that's when you can play stuff down and start aggressively questing. So yeah, there's no tricks to that one. Pretty much what I've said, the standard lines in the original guide. You can just follow his lines and you should be able to win the matchup very easily. I've not really had too many troubles with it, but you can leave a comment if you have, and I can talk some more about it because that's what I do. I talk about Lorcana. Um, I'm going to cover Purple Steel or Amethyst Steel, the official name, because Amber Steel and Green Steel, they're very similar in what they do. Um, they've got a very similar mulligan and very similar strategy. So into Amethyst Steel. Amethyst Steel will feel like, for a little bit, it will feel like the Ruby Amethyst matchup, but there is no threat of there ever being a Be Prepared happen, which is really great for us. The only positive they get is on 2 they can play a Smee, which is the same as like when Ruby Amethyst plays the Snake, but they don't lose the 1 drop as well. So they can go a little bit wider. But besides that, it's never that scary. They do have some steel removal, but we play a lot of warded up stuff. So again, we play our strongest lines out. We really want to make sure that we can get the Alice Pluto down to there's not much on board. So if we can deal with a one drop, maybe they do pop it at some point. If it's a Chernobog or a Broom, we can get rid of it. If it's Diablo, we can take it out as well. And then on two, I would tend to, if they have a two drop set up, maybe a Smear or a Snake, because that's the only two 3/3s, I would tend to turn this sideways. And why I would do that is I hope they trade into it so their board's even thinner. So then I'll play Alice on the next turn, and then whatever they play on their turn, and then we play the Pluto out. And then it'll be at a point where they should have one thing on board, um, and we have an Alice Pluto set up, and they're going to even need a crab to. They're basically only going to need a crab to do it because they can't do it with anything else. But if not, they can't hit it and then bounce with the fox and then run the fox in. And then we can just kind of be obnoxious and they will have to be chasing us for the rest of the game at that point once they deal the Pluto. Because they will deal the Pluto. They're purple. They do have rush-based cards and they're very, very good at challenging. Um, but at that point, they'll be just chasing us. We can just play a Cogsworth, a Robin Hood. We can just keep playing docks and spamming our cards on the board. And we can just, keep going from there and just aggressively race them as the deck likes to do with resist and stuff like that. Never any fear. Be prepared. Gantu can be a bit of a tricky one because into steel matchups, I don't feel Gantu shines as strong as Baymax does. Baymax having 6 health and Gantu having 3, meaning steel removal is very easy for them to deal with it. This is for all steel matchups, to be honest with you. Unless you can Alice Ward protect the Gantu, it always feels very rough to be playing him into these matchups. But yeah, the deck sort of shines quite well into these low to the ground decks. This is where you'll see it's good. Their game plan's very similar to all the other matchups that it'll play, which are low to the ground. When it's Ruby Amethyst, or no, Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst, because of Be Prepared and the big red removal cards, you're kind of racing them a lot faster. But if you don't have those threats, you can kind of meet the opponent on their level, and the actual deck sometimes doesn't even feel that much aggro because you're doing favourable trades of Calhoun, you're setting up Cogsworth and Alice and stuff like that. But yeah, Emerald Amethyst, it will feel very similar. Just do your lines, play your characters, race your lore, and you should be fine. Yeah, I feel like I'm just going to keep blabbering on. I could do a mulligan guide for it very quickly if you like. So yeah, we don't really need these sorts of cards. This would be on the player, on the draw. I'm very much an aggressive mulliganer. I like to just basically go for the best line that I possibly can every turn, even if it's something like, hey, I could play a Pete on 3, or hey, I do want the Cogsworth at the end. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm going to draw into one. I get terrible hands, I get punished for it, like quite oftenly when I do that. But I feel like the way that Lorcana's built is they give you such a gracious mulligan. The best thing to do is mulligan as strong as you can for the best lines that your deck can possibly do. So I always do that. And I'm going to do another one because that was just me blatantly saying how bad I am at Lorcana. So yeah, this was into uh, what's it called? Ruby Amethyst. Oh no, Amethyst Steel. Sorry, I keep saying like this. This is sort of safe ink. It's kind of strange how I'm wording smear safe ink. I would just send the doc back to be honest with you. Yeah, and I'd probably get rid of the Pete. It might feel good to stop some of their Amethyst removal, or maybe stop with friends. I don't think it'd feel good to stop with friends. But overall, you don't really want it. So I would ink that, play that. Probably get the Calhoun set up because she's just a bit more she's going to do a lot more work. They're going to play very good targets for you to use on it, and it won't take the damage when you turn it sideways, so it won't be a fire the cannons target. Set that up, set up the Alice, set up the Pluto lock, and then we'd actually probably get to a point where we're just going to have to hard play this on top. Um, the only reason I kept it is it's a really good ink to have. Maybe there's a scenario where they're going so aggressive and they're out tempoing us, would take the shift over the Alice. I don't think there'd be many of them. That's only if they went one drop on one, two drops, two, one drops on two, and three one drops on three or whatever, something insane like that. But honestly, getting the Alice Pluto will probably be better. But actually, a good example then on the draw would be one, two, three, and then having these things just start trading inwards to start taking out their board and chasing the law. That's pretty good. So actually, there's a pretty good example there. Somehow landed on a decent mulligan there. On the play, Alice Pluto lock, brilliant. You play your one drops and your two drops. On the draw, one, two, and then one, two, Calhoun instead, and then get the Robin Hood shift and start trading things in and chase the law. Because purple does have a lot of one drops. That has like the best one drops in the game, so there's loads of targets for you to take out. So get that one out of the way. Get rid of that one. Go into Amber Steel. So Amber Steel is kind of trickier because they will have things like Cinderella singing. It could remove a Robin Hood, so Sticky Mickey's pretty good there. And you might think having a 1-2 versus their 1-2, but all R has is one resist, isn't that good? It's not that bad. It just quest for you. And Mickey into, and it can also do things like pop a Lawrence. It could maybe finish off a Smee once it's coming to the end of its like lifespan. But the thing that I find always brilliant about it is if you play Mickey into Calhoun, you have a perfect machine there to take out daisies. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, when you play this into a lot of daisy decks, you're gonna end up getting to a point where you kind of maybe want Daisy to stick around and deal with everything else because the deck, of course, doesn't have a lot of card draw, but it does have 51 characters. So if they play a Daisy, the odds is you're going to draw a bunch of cards when they play it. But yeah, still, if they're going to aggressively, quest for the Daisy, maybe if you're on the draw, these two are pretty good for that. So Mickey into Calhoun, into the Alice Pluto lock for a lot of the games. This is always just going to be a tried and true method. This deck actually sort of shined, and where it came from really was its Steel Song matchup. Steel Song was looking like it was going to be the deck to play for set six, which let's be honest, it kind of is. But we noticed they don't have a lot of challengers, they have a lot of singers, and if your stuff has ward, they have to run it into your stuff, and it takes a bunch of damage when it does it. So that's why we went for the Alice Pluto, and it's really, really strong there. But there's also another, so yeah, the standard line of 1-drop, 2-drop, Alice Pluto, Cogs on top, 5 drops on top is going to work. It's a pretty good line. It's probably going to work better into most matchup. Into Doc Mines is going to work amazingly. Into a lot of the Steel Songs is going to work amazingly if you're on the play. Something else to mention though, if they get the wheel off, if you're against a wheel variant, it can be kind of tricky because they're going to be able to spam 1 cost, 2 cost characters a lot wider than you are because a lot of our decks 5-drop heavy, so maybe they wheel you, and all you can really do is just play a Gantu or a Robin Hood. So that doesn't feel great. So another line to do if you're going to get wheeled is play the 1-drop, the 2-drop. If you're on the play maybe an Alice or a John Silver, but then play the Pete to stop the aerial, and then play the Cogsworth down. So you lock in a very strong board with a lot of stuff, and it all has resist 1, and they can't really do much about it, and you just win the game. So Pete stopping an aerial is very, very big. And on the draw, sadly, you're going to have to do it for like 2 more turns because they'll play that aerial first, then you have to play Pete, and then you have to play another Pete. So that can be tricky. It just makes the game on the draw a bit harder. But on the draw, yeah, 1-drop, 2-drop, Pete on turn 3, Pete on turn 4, Cogsworth is awesome. You get like this really wide board with 3/3 attackers, Cogsworth set up, and then anything you play off the top gets the value of the Cogsworth as well. So that's just yeah an awesome spot. But again, actually, I've recorded this about 2 or 3 times because I keep screwing up the recording of it. But the more I think about it, this is probably the best way I've described it. Is you get the 1-drop. Is the Alice Pluto line is like the place it shines as Steel Song. But if they're going to wheel you before you can get the line to work, getting the Pete down is just really, really good, and just locking them out of the game, just pretty big because a lot of their hand will be songs. They won't really want to do with it. They might just dump a character on the board just to get the turns going. But yeah, that's sort of the lines there, and I don't really need to mulligan because you kind of just heard what I said to get. I guess really, I could do a mulligan one quickly. Actually, well, I just want to cover one more thing here. Strength is pretty good here as well because it equals out the board. If you can get one of these 3 costs set down, like if you set up the Pete and then you sing Strength and take out a Lawrence or a Smee or something, that's huge. And one of the reasons why we include Baboom, and we used to play Twinfire, but now we play Baboom, is for a matchup like this because they will have a Cinderella and they will have a Robin Hood, and either of them getting to shift is huge. Cinderella getting to sing a lot is also huge. I still say you play a Calhoun or something like that over a Baboom, but if not, it's always not a bad thing to just deal the Cinderella as early as you can. This is mainly the Baboom is here if they get these shift lines off, like Shift Queen or Shift, um, what's it called? Robin Hood. It's just too big and it's too much to deal with us, and there's no way that we're out tempoing them when they've got 5 cost characters on turn 2 and 3. So Baboom is very big for that, and that's one of the reasons why we play Baboom. Of course, I'd say if you were doing a game like where you've seen them do the Robin Hood shift line or something like that, of course blind you would have no idea. But if you've seen them do something like a Robin Hood shift line, we're going to mulligan. We did not find the Baboom, but if say one of these cards was a Baboom, like this was a Baboom, you'd keep it around. If they were to play the Robin Hood down, if they spam multiple shift lines, you'd have to eye up what you think would be the best shift line to remove. Um, Probably like the Robin Hood one because the Queen one's bad, but you can trade with it. So that's not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, and the Cinderella 5/5, you pretty much have to race it, so you've got to deal with that shift line if it's getting closer to 5 ink. But yeah, Baboom is kind of there just for shutting down shift lines, and that's why we use it in the deck. Again, we used to use Twinfire because we used to try and control the board. We realized controlling the board's not the best thing in the world to do, and the one card discard can be kind of rough. So yeah, Baboom is there for setting off the very powerful shift lines, which are the Queen, Robin Hood, and Cinderella. So yeah, that's kind of the Steel Song matchup. It's kind of where the deck will shine the most. You will still get wheeled and just rolled over because Steel Song is still an amazingly powerful deck. It's not like I'm saying this deck counters it, but this deck has a lot of things that make a problem for Steel Song. If they've got like a big Zeus sat in hand and they really wanted to sing it before they play the wheel, but you've got Alice Pluto set up and they haven't really got a target, they've had to wheel, burn those songs that are pretty powerful, and they're not really having any good follow up. You're kind of just making it a really painful game for them. So giving things ward for some reason, if you didn't know this, is pretty good against Steel Song because they can't use a lot of their songs. So awesome, awesome Steel Song matchup. I think you still would get high rolled. I still think it's a toxic matchup, but I like my chances and I kind of take Steel Song if I get paired into it, which is awesome. We go into Emerald Amethyst, which is the last one. And again, I might have said in this recording or one of the last two that I've tried is again, I'm really sorry it's late and I've been trying to record this for a while now. You can get to a point where you can just Pete lock them out of the game. So you can go 1 drop, 2 drop, and then you can play Pete on 3, Pete on 4, play the Cogsworth down, and this will stop the Ursula from singing. It will stop Prince John getting value from maybe a sudden chill or something like that. And that can be done on the play on the draw because they might even have a Diablo shift and then sing something, or Ursula on 2 sing player Prince John, or whatever shenanigans they're going to do. But again, you'll be playing things first. So on the play, if you want to set up an Alice instead, and on 4 play Pete, and then Cogs off on 5, that's fine. On the draw, you probably want to try and get the Pete on 3 and the Pete on 4. But yeah, that's sort of the game plan as it goes. A lot of the, I mean, notice a lot of them don't play Bruno anymore. That still is a steel matchup. So um, yeah, there's a lot of painful things they can do in this deck, do in this matchup, sorry. So Gantu kind of gets inked. Robin Hood's still pretty good. If you can get the shift line off, that's good. A lot of them are merfolks as well, so you kind of want to chase them early. And the discarding, it might feel rough, but let's be honest, you get to like 4 or 5 ink. If you watch my game versus Kawa, I think I was just sat at 4 ink for most of those games. Because the deck is designed to play off the top. So once they get you into top deck mode, you're actually in not the worst spot because the deck is designed just to play cards off the top and just play them on the board and start turning them sideways. So it's not the worst thing in the world. But again, as I said, this is kind of like the Steel Song matchup. As I mentioned, Pete, the boom is there for if a Diablo is going to go crazy and just get a bunch of card draw. And I'll say one thing about Diablo, he is not your primary target to remove things. If one Diablo's out, you don't really mind them getting the 1 card draw return. Like I say, the issues that you'll find with Diablo usually is that you're playing cards like Hiram, or you're playing a rabbit and then the Diablo benefits of it. We're not playing any of those cards, so all they really get is 1 card a turn. But if they play 2 Diablos, you're kind of out of the game, so you have to baboon one of them then. But before that, you can kind of let 1 Diablo sit. I would probably prefer to play a card to start aggressively questing, like just anything that can quest, and start going for it. And giving things ward, Alice, Cogsworth, it's just brilliant because they can't use strength, let the Storm Rage on, they can't use, um, what's it called, Bruno, anything like that. So just questing and aggressively racing for the game. I will say, if they play the Hidden Cove, it's kind of a bit rough there. And I notice how much of my guides always describe things as kind of a bit rough. So you want to play the 1 drop, Calhoun and Pete. Calhoun and Pete pretty much means that you can take out a Cove because you've got 2-3 attackers on the board there. So yeah, that's fine. Baymax is pretty good. They will play the Muses. That's kind of rough. That might bounce that, but then you could just use it again if they don't discard you. And yeah, setting in the Alice Pluto lock again is just another matchup where the example of the deck works pretty well. And you can just easily win that. I noticed out of these 2 videos I've done, I won't be covering Emerald Amethyst, but I can cover it if anyone wants me to, and if anyone requests it in the comments, I can definitely cover that one. But that's also a matchup, I think, where the deck kind of shines quite brightly. But yeah, back to Emerald Steel. Again, don't be too scared of the, what's it called? Um, Diablo shift line. Once they get the Prince John set up and you've maybe got through some Pete's, you can just hand dump and just play off the top and start turning sideways. Their engine will be shut down. They won't be getting any card draw. They play a lot of weaker singers like Prince John and Ursula, so Alice Pluto makes for a good spot. They do play Calhoun, some of them do, which is kind of rough. You kind of want to turn it sideways and make them trade as soon as you can, just so you can get their Calhoun off the board, because that can be a bit of a painful card with Pluto. If they run like a 1 drop Diablo and then an Ursula and then they hit it with a Calhoun, they can clear it quite easily. So getting Calhoun off the board is pretty good. You kind of want them just littered with 1 and 2 attacker type characters and they're stuck in the Alice Pluto lock. But yeah, very much what I've covered in the Amber Steel one. I can quickly go through a mulligan there, but I don't think it's that crazy. I think if this hand was better, you could keep the Cogsworth because that is where you're topping out. If you had the Pete and you were on the play, And I kind of like the idea of keeping the Robin Hood shift line. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Because unless they have Diablo shift sing that the Storm Rage on, they can't really deal with it. So actually, I think I'd keep for that. And I don't think that's too bad. It kind of looks like we're gonna have to play the Alices out, but ink that, play that, see what we get that down. We might want to get the Alice down if they haven't Calhouned on two instead of the Robin Hood shift, and then we can maybe do the Robin Hood shift the next turn, or just play another Alice. To be honest with you, they'll be setting up so much stuff like Ursula and Prince John. As long as they don't put a Calhoun down to start controlling the board, you can just play the Alices out and turn sideways and just quest. You know, they can't Ursula sing, let the Storm Rage on, take out Alice or the target that you've selected. So it just puts them in a really rough spot. So if you've got Alice's in your hand, don't feel like, oh no, I've got a bricked, uninkable hand. You could definitely win the game. You just start spamming them down and just warding everything that you get off the top up and just keep going sideways. She's going to quest for basically 3 a turn. But we'll do one more just to see if we can get a nice one. To getting close to what we want. Like I say, again, if we had just like the Pete in our hand, I would probably keep a Cogsworth, but we don't. We don't actually have the Alice, so I've always find Pluto, especially into steel matchups, quite rough if you don't have the Alice. So we get rid of it. So I don't think that's the worst hand in the world. So we probably get rid of probably get rid of a flute. No, probably a Baymax because we're trying to keep up too much value here. Get the Mickey out, Calhoun out. If we're on the draw, we get the Pete. Maybe hopefully get another Pete. Hopefully get something actually else better to play on 3. It's kind of rough that we don't have anything else besides Pete to play on 3. And then Pete lock and then get the Cogsworth set down so you can lock the entire thing. So if we were on the play and we had something else to play on 3, we'll play that. Then they'll play Ursula. Then we'll play Pete, and then we'll play Cogsworth. And you can see how the board will just be so strong. Has resist, everything turns sideways, and just quest for a bunch of lore. And that's just a really awesome spot to be in. On the draw, we just hope to get another Pete. I think maybe to lock for another turn of no Ursula. But yeah, as I said, in the steel matchups, Pete is very strong. A lot of them are playing steel removal cards, and Alice Pluto is pretty good because they're gonna have to run things into it, and especially into Emerald Steel and Amber Steel, where there's just a lot of singers in their deck. Like their entire deck is based around singing things, kind of. Let's be honest. You can get a lot of value there. So yeah, Alice and Pluto, the lock is awesome. Pete or stall them as well to let you set things up with the Cogsworth. And it's really good because this is not a Ruby matchup. So that means Cogsworth actually gets a stick, so he actually gets value. So yeah, I think the deck will shine a lot stronger into Emerald Steel and Amber Steel. But I hope some of that rambling helped. I'd hope you could actually call that a guide or at least some tips. So thank you very much.